from Wednesdays, you will notice that I talked a little bit. You could go back and review that particular video, and we talked about Michelangelo, and we talked about Botticelli, and how in the Renaissance in the 1500s, I gotta go way back, way back. They actually did artwork that had to do with relief, and this happens to be the family with the child. This was one of Michelangelo's sculpted reliefs, and it is round, tondo, synonym for rondo in musical terms. It is round, and it does have relief. The background is not as important. Of course, today we're going to do a nice background, so it doesn't quite fit that mode of what tondo was trying to do. And then this one I showed you last time too, by Michelangelo. So it's the happens to be Madonna and with child. So you can see it's in a round frame, wooden frame. Pretty nice. Yeah. Anyway, so you can look at the prior videos to find out more about tondo. And if you happen to be just joining in, or you weren't quite sure exactly what we're painting today, we are doing a desert landscape. So the landscape is going to be, or the background is going to be as important as the foreground. You can choose to do it with a daytime sky. Like this is one that inspired me for the traffic cabinet that I did for the city of Goodyear. So I love the saguaros. I think they're so native and such a representation of where we live in the Sonoran Desert. You can't find them anywhere else in the world. So you could do this daytime look, or if you really want to do a nighttime look, you can do that too. I'm going to be working in watercolor today. So either of these I can do in watercolor, but you can also do them in acrylic. So if all you brought today was your acrylics and your pastels or your watercolor pencils, no worries, because you're going to be able to do it just fine. All right, I am going to go over your supplies and make sure you have everything, especially with a few more people joining in, and that will give you a little bit of time to run around the house to see if there's something you're missing. So today you're going to need a cup, right, for your yucky water. Watercolor tends to not get too dirty as you work, but you know what, just in case, I always have 2 cups, and I haven't told you that before, but just so I don't have to, for the sake of time, run to the sink and have to clean it out. I also have a little spray bottle that I keep handy, and I have a big one and I have a little one. So when I'm working in watercolor, I actually take this little one because sometimes I like to spritz the actual canvas, my watercolor paper. Speaking of watercolor paper, you should have watercolor paper that looks like this. If it sounds like this, that's good heavy paper. If it sounds like that, not so great. That would be like your paper that comes out of the copy machine. It won't hold up to water. So you want something that's got some tooth, some thickness to it. Mixed media paper will work just fine. If you're doing acrylic paint, well then of course you're working on a duck canvas cloth, so you'll be fine today. I asked on your list if you would bring some Crayola washable markers, and I know that's not a conventional thing to paint with, but I totally love using this, not only to draw but to add details at the end. So drawing at the beginning, drawing at the end, and just maybe using it for a nice little wash. So I wanted y'all to experiment with that as much as I love experimenting with it. I also have some erasers. You know I don't love to erase, but we are going to draw at the beginning. If you have a pencil handy, that would be awesome. I know that don't draw heavy-handed, so just be very gentle, and you won't have to erase lines. After your whole painting is dry, you could come back and try to erase those pencil lines. I also have some India ink. Now that's how I created this one to get the really, really black. this was not on your list. You do not have to have that today, but I want you to know how I made it really, really black for those of you who are going to probably email me and ask me that. In your watercolor set, you probably have a black, and you could use that black to do your silhouette piece. The difference between the waterproof India ink and the black that comes in here is the waterproof ink is waterproof, and it's not going to mix with your dry watercolors. In other words, once you put it on, it's permanent. It can't be washed off. It is, if you get it onto your sky, you know, if you get this ink onto your sky later, it's not going to muddy up your sky. So it's a really good tool to use when you're doing silhouettes. Again, you can use the black right out of here. No worries whatsoever. Okay, I also have some masking that was not on the list. Do not have to use it, but if you really wanted to make a moon or a sun and you don't want your sky to get involved and mixing with your moon and your sky, this is a really good way to block it. And I'll just show you my little hints along the way. You know, you could come back and do this later with some of those tools and have a whole new painting. It's all good. Your watercolor set may have 8 in the little pan from Crayola or Prang or whatever you have, but if you just have some tubes, you really don't need the whole gambit of watercolor tubes. I teach a watercolor class, and I've been trying to encourage people to just start with 4, and you're able to make 8 or 16 new colors from that. And brushes. How many people have brushes? Really, with watercolor, you can use just about anything you have, but I do have a flat horsehair synthetic brush. Feels like makeup. Mine does have a little point on the end, so if you are wondering when I'm painting what the heck that thing is, it draws nice lines, or in this case, it might be nice for my cactus thorns, but you do not have to have that. Just showing you in case you're wondering what that is. I have a rigger brush. You don't need that. These are just tools. You might be looking at the store and go, what's all the difference? Really, the only things I'm using today are these two. I have a round number 6, and I think this one is a 10 or a 1/4 inch wide flat brush, a wash brush. Now, I think that's everything. Napkins. I do have a little sponge. This is like your kitchen sponge, not like the sea foamy ones that you use in the bathtub. This one has less holes in it, and you could cut off a piece from your kitchen sink, or you can find these in the makeup part of the store or the dollar store. No worries there. If you are doing a sun or a moon, right, you might want to use your cup as your template, or you could use, here's a top to a sour cream or something. I don't know what it came from, but, or you could use the tape, you know, something that is round if you want to have a round moon in your picture. With that, I think we got everything done. I think I'm going to tilt my camera down. I have to work horizontal with watercolor. So I'm going to tilt it down, and I'm going to flip myself so it looks like I'm right side up. Yay! I'm excited about this today. Da, 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 da. Here we go. Everything I've been talking about right in front of me. All right. And I am going to now flip this because I think this is not right side up to you. I want to flip myself. So hold on just 1 second here. All right, now I'm flipped. Okay, and we are ready to start. All right, so I'm going to draw with a purple pencil today, purple watercolor pencil, just so it shows up a little bit better to you. I do have these little blocks. I think I've shown you these before. They're really drafting weights. They've got some heavy beans or rice inside of them. And sometimes I like to prop them underneath my watercolors to keep the water dripping when I'm doing sky first, like dripping in that direction. I need to take them out right now because I'm going to be drawing. So this is what we're drawing today. If you're doing the wanting to put the moon in, you can do that too. I'll show you how to do that. But I'm going to do the one kind of like that inspired my traffic cabinets. So I am going to start here and draw a horizon line. I'm going to start, about, let's see, 2/3 of the way down the canvas. And I'm going to draw myself a skyline or a mountain line, not a mountain lion, but a mountain line of the beautiful Estrellas where I live. They're pretty rugged. This is going to be our backdrop. So you do not have to have a straight line. It could be really bumpity if you wanted. And if you're going to put that moon in, here's what I did. I just stuck the top, or it could be a piece of tape, or it could be your cup, right? You could just trace around your cup. And you're just going to take your pencil and put a line around it like that. So it's coming up over the horizon. That nice little moon's coming up. Now, the saguaro itself, it's so beautiful. It's so sculptural. It has all these beautiful arms that are displaying everywhere. I'm going to make my saguaro on this half of my paper. So I'm going to start him down here at the bottom. And I'm going to just take my line all the way up. And look how bold that looks, like a huge cucumber of sorts. Okay, so I took it all the way up. If you want to stop short because you want maybe you want your cacti to be a lot smaller, you do not have to go that far up. In fact, if you're going to be doing yours in silhouette, I wouldn't worry too much at this point where your cacti is going to go, because the black's going to cover everything. All right, so I've got my big old arm going here. If you're doing acrylic, you're drawing the same thing. Now I'm going to have an arm. Oh, maybe he's going to hit the side of my moon this time. And he's going to have another little arm peeking out from behind him. And let's see, maybe another little arm. I'm not using a ruler or a straight edge. I don't really need that. Everything in nature is very organic, and it's very loose. It's not straight. No straight lines here. So that's my one big guy. I'm going to make him a friend over here in the corner. He's not going to be as tall or fat because he's further away. So here's my two lines. He's growing up. He's going to break the plane of my mountain. And I'm going to give him some arms. You could make your arms really silly. You know, if you joined me in our last class, we were working on things by Diego and his work. And this is one of his, Diego Rivera's cacti. I just love how crazy this one is. This was done in the 1930s. But look how he's got some going down. So if you want your arms to do crazy stuff, please do. It's really fun. Also, if I didn't talk about this, but if you don't want to do your picture landscape and you really wanted to do it this direction, you could have done that too. So it's probably not even too late to change that if you wanted to do that. All right, here we go. We're going to draw another arm to this guy. Now I've got 1, 2, 3 kind of items. I'm going to, in the foreground, I think I'm going to have just some crazy bushes. Don't get too detailed, right? Watercolor is not very detailed, but you got to have a plan. We need to know what we're going to be doing, because you cannot erase the watercolor once you put it down. You can't paint over it. Those acrylics, painters out there, you're going to be able to paint over it if you don't like something. Now I'm going to block in where the bottom of my mountains are going to stop. So right here, this is going to be where my sand pile kind of happens, or there's a shift in geographical rock formation. So I've got a line for the bottom of the particular mountain range, whichever mountain range you're doing. I just hiked in an area, a different desert, and I'm going to butcher the name, the Chihuahua Desert, which is different than Sonoran. It was so wonderful. They definitely have different cacti than the Sonora Desert. It was so beautiful. Nobody was out there. It was just lovely. And it was a really high elevation. We were at 6,500 for the elevations. It was just fantastic for my husband and I to be hiking. It was really nice. And just a nice little break in general. Okay. Beautiful, beautiful, right? Like you can have a beautiful Sonoran landscape that can transcend time and our heat. Ah, you can feel like you're enjoying it without having to go and walk in it right now. Okay, I am going to lay this down. I'm going to prop mine up like with those little weights underneath, so it's kind of running this direction right now because we're going to paint the background first. Before I started this lesson, I prepped the back of my sheet. And what I mean by prep the back of it, like if you're always noticing that your paper's curling up a lot, I put a tiny little spritz. I just went like this. And then I took my finger and I went all over the back, and then I let it dry, and then I flipped it and then taped it down. So you do not have to do that for today, but that's what you can practice. You could always take, when you're done and it's fully dry, put it between two of your coffee table books and get it all flattened and ready to go. So it's all good, all good. All right, ready to get some colors going. Now you can choose to do dark colors, or you can choose to do light colors. So I'm going to start out looking here and go, I think my sky, just like I did in this original, I'm going to go dark toward the top. So that means I'm going to use a lot of the blue and purple out of my tray. Try to avoid black and brown. Okay, so brown is just a combination of all the colors together, and it just might muddy up your beautiful sky. So I'm just going to go with purple and blue, and I actually have two sets here that I'm going to work from. Your blue might be a little bit different depending on what brand. You know, there's ultramarine, there's phthalo blue, there's all kinds of different blues out there. Cerulean. Okay, so I'm just going to take that. Oh, wow. I love it already. I love how, and I'm using my wash brush. I'm using the one that's like a 1/4 inch flat brush. And as long as the canvas is wet with color, this is where I can actually add some salt to it to make it more interesting. So table salt is one of those things that you probably just have sitting around right in front of you right now. And when it's wet like that, I can just sprinkle a little bit of salt on there and create texture, maybe a monsoon happening in my sky. So that could be something that you can add to your work. And I'm just going to take a little bit of this different blue and some purple. Spray my colors with my cute little spray bottle here. Yes, I love that purple to outer space. It's going to give me a lot of depth perception and just really add to the whole piece. I can also use the spray bottle and spray directly onto my sky and create interesting patterns and runs. If you're doing this in acrylic, you can do the same thing. You can water down your paints and create some really interesting patterning in the sky. I'm kind of just dabbing and dotting at it, just kind of to create some really neat movement in my sky. If you just want a smooth sky like I did in this one, you can do that where you're just going back and forth and just making a gradation from dark to light. But I'm going to change mine up a little bit because I never two things are the same. So this is what I'm doing. I'm doing kind of a combo of the two. All right, so we got that going. I don't mind if it goes over my green cacti, right? Because blue and yellow make green. So I don't mind if I get blue onto the cactus. If you're trying to avoid the moon, that's where this rubber cement could help. So just for the sake of showing you, not that you need to have it, you could have outlined this right around the edge to keep anything from going in there. You could also use a pastel, an oil pastel. Oil and water do not like each other, so they're going to resist one another. So if I were to take the oil even and use it around the edge, I would keep it out of the moon's surface. So these are just other tools that when you replay this later on YouTube, maybe then you could practice that. I always try to give you as much information as I can. All right, let's see. Now, if you get this little pooling going on up here, like I've got going on, I can take a napkin and I can dab at it if you don't want the pool of dark blue. Ooh, look, I can even use the napkin and dab at the sky and add it somewhere else. Okay, now what I'm going to, now that's how I got that dark edge by tilting my canvas just a hair. I'm going to keep working down the canvas. I think I'm going to put a little green in there, believe it or not. That just seems fun, a little green. Like our green flash that we did with the beach the other day. You guys did an awesome job. If you've had a chance to go see the gallery space online virtually, you know what I'm talking about, how beautiful everything looks. If you haven't seen it yet, please go check it out. The city did a great job showing off your artwork. Oh, throwing a little bit of salt back in there. Let's see, what other color could I put on there next? I love yellow, and my yellow had run out. So what I did is I just went and put some of my new gamboge from one of my tube paints and just stuck it in there, in the well. And voila, I now have a place to put my yellow that I ran out of. I can go right over the cactus, right? Because he's going to be green anyway. And yellow and blue make green. Now, because I blocked my moon, this is not going to get into the moon. If you are not blocking the moon, or you don't even have a moon, don't worry about it. But you can always just paint right up to it. The more water you add, right? The more water you add to the tint, the lighter it's going to become. If I just use the yellow right out of the watercolor cake or the tube, it's a little more intense. So I'm going to try to get mine lighter as I get toward the horizon line, because things are typically lighter near the horizon, which makes sense because that's where your sun or moon is setting or rising. So it's putting off more light closer to the bottom here. Wow. I'm working on a 9x12 piece of watercolor paper. It's 140 pounds of pressure applied to it. That's why it's got the number 140 on on the pad of paper, just in case you're wondering, what's 140 mean? If you're using 100 or 90 pound, your paper's probably buckling a little bit more. It might be a little bit more difficult. I'm just playing with a little table salt that I had sitting around. I thought that would be fun to add to it. So I've got some blue and purple. Now I may come back and add more to that. I just need to let that dry. I'm working my way down the canvas. With watercolor, it's a layering. You can't just keep brushing back over and over and over it like you can with acrylics. Well, even with acrylics, you'd be pulling the paint back off. And with watercolor, you're going to tear a hole in your paper. So you really, really want to try to avoid doing that, rubbing your finger back and forth. I can't wait to see what you're creating. I'm going to put a little bit of orange into mine next. So let's try some orange in there. But I could add this later too once things dry. Let's see what happens when I add a little bit of orange. I love how the colors mix together. Okay, I'll put a little bit more orange down here. And I'm going to leave some areas really white. In watercolor, there is no white in the palette. You can buy titanium white, which comes in a tube like this. It's opaque, and it's not as white as your paper, just so you know. So there's some tricks to it. If you're interested in joining one of my more involved watercolor classes, I'm happy to set up a class and invite you to join that. Always fun. Okay, I'm moving now to those cool looking mountains. Oh my gosh, I love these. I love the mountains. And for me, I love color. Your mountains might want to be purple, blue. And you can paint them whatever color you want. You might want to have green mountains. I'm gonna do some orange because I just love that Southwest look. So I'm gonna dip my brush into orange and reds and paint these awesome mountains. I'm still using my wash brush, the fatter one. That's what I'm using. There's no detail going on here. And I'm painting in the way the mountain would grow. So he's pushing up out of the ground. Oops, I got a little bit on my moon, which is okay. My moon could be glowing, but I see I caught it before it dries. This is an awesome project to do in the middle of our week. You know, just very relaxing. Maybe you're in the middle of meetings today and you just wanted to take a break and paint before you get on to your next meeting. Most meetings are done online today, so it's quite difficult to keep focusing. I know. I've got one tonight. Okay, great. So I've got a little orange in those mountains, and now I'm going to add a little bit of red to my mountains. What would be a mountain without a little bit of red? Now, if yours is dripping and it might break into the sky, just catch it with your napkin. I don't care if I get a little red onto my Saguaros. You know why I don't care? I don't care because the opposite of green is red. So I don't care if I get a little bit, because it'll just look like a darker green when I'm done. With watercolor, it's going to pick up the color below and mix with it, unlike acrylics. Because acrylics, the green or red would have been dry by the time I put the green over it, and it would just be green on top, and nobody would know I had red splashed on it. Okay, so I have a plan here. Oh, I got a little bit of sky showing right there, which could stay white. I think I'm gonna do something in there. All right, so now I'm gonna move down here to the desert floor. Yay! Okay, here we go. So I'm gonna put a little bit of yellow in my desert floor for sand. This is where I could put more table salt too to make it look more texture. I might just put a tad of blue with it. Maybe there's some green spots. A recent rain made some green spots. Maybe there's a big streak of red right in there. You decide what your desert floor's got. It could have some really cool stuff going on. Might be some quail walking by. That's what I did in my cabinet design. I put quail. I have to present it tonight to the city, so it's on my mind. It's kind of interesting that this project timed with the date they gave me for my presentation tonight. I should just say, watch the video. Oh, I see some familiar faces out there. I'm so glad you're back here joining us. I thank the city for having me come and partnering with them to teach you all some of my tips. A lot of you already paint a lot, and that's great. So if this is just time out for you to inspire you to keep going, then that's great. If this is your first time painting, that's awesome. And hopefully it will inspire you to keep going. Or at the very least, appreciate what other people do. I do it for a living, and so I totally appreciate other artists and what they do, and they inspire me to keep going. Okay, so I got some crazy colors going on in that desert floor, which I really want. I'm going to keep this little piece white, so I'm not going to put anything in it. You know, with watercolor, you have to kind of keep it white unless you had masking that I showed you, like rubber cement. Kind of cool when I look at this on camera because they can just see the negative space, which is going to become positive in just a second, right? We're painting all the background, everything else but the moon and the saguaros. Okay, I think we're at a good spot where I can actually maybe let Rosie say a few minutes of something about maybe the gallery and how you can, if you feel so inclined, to donate tips to me, and then we'll get busy on our cactus.
Thank you all for being here today. I just wanted to let you know that you do have the option to send in your artwork, and you will be featured in our virtual art exhibit. I did send out an email to everyone with that link, and we actually now have it on the Goodyear Arts and Culture webpage. So if you have any questions, or if you want to take a look at any of that, everything, all of the information is mostly on our website. So also I will link some tips tip links on the chat box for Deborah. Those are donations that go to her for supplies, for all of the amazing work she does for the city. And obviously those, like I said, are donations. So that is up to you completely. And like I said, I will link those below. You will have to copy and paste those into a browser. They don't direct you anywhere. So if you just copy and paste onto a browser, if you ever need any instructions or direction on how to do it, definitely email myself or Deborah and we can walk you through that as well.
Thank you, Rosie. I appreciate that. She's been awesome moderating for this program. Obviously, I could not do it without her because I would have been not able to answer any of your questions. And so that leads me to letting you know you're welcome to ask a question through the chat and she can read it to me or it'll prompt me. I can actually see if she's trying to notify me. So she doesn't have to read your question out loud or your name or anything like that. So feel free to answer or ask and I can answer those questions. That's what's nice about the Zoom part, that we are doing it live together as opposed to on the YouTube where I can't interact with you. So this is a wonderful way. And we get to share each other's work at the end if you feel so led, because it's great to see what everyone else is doing. Otherwise, you can see it on the gallery if you did submit yours. So that's fun. Okay, so let's get back to this painting here. And I have everything but the objects left. So I've got all the background done and I'm ready to do all the objects. So let's do that now. And we are ready to start that. So what I'm going to do is take I think I'm going to just go ahead and use my green washable marker for now. And I'm going to go ahead and just block in the edges of my saguaro. I love working with these washable markers because they like water, hence the word washable. If it doesn't say washable on it, like it does here, then you could still use it, but it probably won't bleed as much as you want it to. I can dip it into the water cup and I can actually draw with it that way. Or I can take my round brush and dip it in the water and watch that marker bleed. Now, if it's bleeding into your desert behind, because it wasn't quite dry behind, or you can just dab at that and we can come back later and fill that little spot in with some desert creature or plant. So that's what's nice about kind of just using the marker without dipping it yet. I'll just kind of fill it in up here. I'm going to go right through that yellow. So it's kind of mixing the yellow and orange, making kind of a mossy green now, a yucky, pukey green, which is cool. I like that. If you've watched my other paint videos, you know I like to use the dark and a light side. So maybe this cactus is going to have the light side be where the mossy green is, and the darker side is lending itself. Actually, you know, I might have to reverse that though, because this is my moon over here. So I might have to make this the light side and make this darker. Always have to take into consideration where you have light coming from. Now, if you're doing this in silhouette, this part would be, you would use your India ink at the end. Wait till everything else is dry around it, or your India ink could spill over into your sky. If you're working in acrylic, you can go for it right now. I'm just spilling this in. Let's see, what else do I want? Oh, this is going to be green over here. I don't need to fill the whole thing in, just a little bit. Because I'm going to let the water do the work later. And I'm going to go fill this guy in over here. Maybe some of you joined me when we did Venice and we used these markers. Okay, now I know that yellow and blue make green. So I'm going to add a little blue over some of my greens for the dark side of my cactus. So if this is the sun or the moon, I want to put a little blue on the opposite side of the cactus arm where the sun doesn't hit it, or maybe under its elbow right there. Just think about where your light is. Oh, I bet your art's looking awesome right now. You could use purple instead of blue if that's all you've got in your markers. Or you can just be dipping out of your paint wells in your set and adding that. You could leave it little white spots. You don't have to put it in solid. I'm just kind of skipping around. I don't make a solid inked cactus. All right, maybe a little yellow in there with it. This is gonna look so awesome. This would not be considered mixed media, just so you know. This would still fall under painting, watercolor painting. You're using the ink out of the marker to make it painterly. Okay, let's do some magic. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to do this. Okay, so I'm gonna dip my round brush. I switched, I don't have my flat brush, so I'm using the round one now. And I'm just going to rub it over my marker. And let it do its thing. You can always add more back to it, or more marker to it, and more paint. I'm just letting those all mix together. I got some in the sky. I'm gonna dab it off. Have that napkin ready. I'm gonna make it much darker because my moon or my sun, whichever it is that's going down, or moon coming up, I am going to make my cactus even darker. So this is my first layer. Remember I told you there's layering to be done? This is my first layer. Okay, while that's setting up and drying, I'm going to move down here to those bushes in my foreground. I'm going to do the same thing. So just like acrylic paint, you're kind of moving around the canvas. So now I'm going to come down here, put a little green. Maybe this is some teddy bear cactus or some kind of prickly pear down here. I have no clue. Put a little purple in there. Purple has red and blue. Blue makes up green, and red is the opposite of green. Blue. Typically things that are closer to you are more bold. So that's why I add a little more purple to it. And some red. Let's find some red. Let's find some red. Okay, I left the tips of all of the foreground cacti kind of white, and I'm just going to add little bits of yellow because they're closer to the light. Okay, and now I'm going to paint it. Yay! So it's a combination of using my washable markers and my pan of watercolors for this very simple technique. It's nice to be able to travel too. I took these with me last week, just the markers. They're not going to melt on me in the car, and I can use them in my sketchbook. And then I could come back later when I get home and then add a little water to them. So that's nice that you could travel with them if you don't have much space. Plus, your grandkids probably have them sitting around and they're about to throw them out. Hey, by the way, you don't need a new set. You can reactivate these, the older ones. So if they feel like they're dried out, you test them out and they barely work, guess what? All you do is dip them in some water and you can activate. There's still ink in there. Okay, so I've got this really dark, which is what I love. And I want some of this cacti in the foreground to actually, the color of it to actually be in my saguaro as well. I'll put a little salt on that. Okay, so I'm gonna take some of the purple, and this is gonna be the dark side. So I'm gonna add a little more purple on this side. A little shadow. Or you could use the red. I'm gonna add a little red in just a minute. I'm getting him darker. Using opposites in your art for the darker areas really work. They just do. Try to avoid being a black or brown use your colors. You will not find brown on the color wheel. Black is just the absence of light. You won't find that on there either. Yay, it's coming out so fun. And I have a light. You might even want a little hole you could draw with your marker, like an area for a little critter that lives in there. Maybe I'll stick one in right here. You know, cactus wren are buried in there somewhere. Okay, now I could draw the thorns with this, right? I could take this marker and do all my thorns. But before I do that, I actually want to draw the striations, the demarcations of the linear lines on the actual cactus. So I'm going to take my marker, and mine's pretty dry at this point. If yours is still really wet, the barrel of your cactus, I would not try this just yet, or your lines will just become part of the cactus. So I'm going to take my marker, make a vertical line. I'll switch to blue because my purple was a little wet. Oh, I really like that. It's just that little hint of the line, vertical lines of the swirl. If you're doing a silhouette, of course, you could still have really, really deep dark colors, or you could have gone all black. And you wouldn't be adding all these little lines. I want them to look kind of faded out. This one's a little too rigid for me. So I'm going to take my brush and unridge them, make them more painterly. The newer your marker, the more it's going to be very rigid. Okay, I'm going to dip now a little bit into my watercolor pans now that I got all my drawing done for the most part, except the thorns. I haven't done the thorns. But I'm going to add a little bit of purple. I'm about to do thorns on the dark side of my cactus. And I'm going to use the end of that paintbrush that had the sharp tip on it. You could use a Q-tip, not a Q-tip, not a Q-tip, what am I wanting to say? A toothpick. But this has like this little sharp end, and where I had that wet, I can actually pull the line out. Isn't that fun? And make those little thorns come alive. If it's not wet, if it's already dried, it's not going to work. Right? So I'm going to add some more water right here. So you just have to kind of do a little area at a time. It's fun. Just a fun thing to do. Draw with the other end of your paintbrush for something sharp. I guess you could use your fingernail if you wanted to. My fingernails are too short as a painter. I'd be constantly picking clay and all kinds of stuff out of my fingers. I learned my lesson the hard way too when I used to do my nails. Oh my gosh. Did a beautiful, what I thought was beautiful. I'm just going to call it beautiful because then it looked horrible after what I did to it. And then I finished this whole colored pencil drawing, and I went like, I don't know, I dropped my pencil and I went like this, and my red fingernail polish went all the way across my drawing. It was not a good day. I had to redo the whole thing. It was for a client. I was so sad. So I don't paint my nails anymore. So I'm just adding all these little fun little thorns. They're going to be smaller on this guy because he's further away. Yay. Okay, I'm just putting the purple on the dark side of the arms. You could use a different color if you wanted, green or red, and I'm just pulling it. Remember, it's almost like it's in silhouette, so those thorns are going to be dark looking and not white. Now I'm going to put some over here on this side. Pulling it into the background of the painting. Now I am going to do some on the barrel itself. So let's say I do a little purple line here, and I'm going to take the end of my brush, or you can use a toothpick or anything you have. You could be using this too. You could use your purple marker and make little thorns. Give him some texture. The salt's really drying nicely. I like how that's happening. Okay, now I'm going to go back up to my skyline and add a little more layering to my skyline. So I'm going to take a little yellow. Put a little yellow over yellow. It'll make it more dark when you put the same color over itself. I just want to streak it through the sky a little more. Maybe put some yellow up higher in the sky along that green line that I did. And now I want some more intense blue. Yes, we're going to paint the moon or the sun, but it's going to be so watered down. Wow. Just adding that second layer is really going to increase the depth, right? Okay, I can spray it. Make it look like it's raining or there's a thunderstorm brewing up there. I can even take my canvas and let it drip a little bit like this now by tilting it. See, that's how I get some of those darker clouds there. It's going to follow the line of the first place you paint it. It's kind of crazy like that. See how it's just kind of following where I put yellow earlier. Pretty cool. And yes, I could put more table salt. Mama mia, throw salt everywhere. Okay, now I'm gonna go over here to my moon. I really, really, really want to water that moon down. I mean, so it's called watercolor, so it's mostly gonna be water and very little color. I'm gonna just dip my yellow into my brush into the yellow and water it down. And my pan over here is dirty, so I'm gonna wipe this down real quick because it was mixing with blue. So I'm just wiping that down. I'm gonna dip my brush in the yellow, put it over here, and water, or it could be my water is yellow. This is switch to cleaner water. And I'm gonna try it over here on my napkin and see what happens. Still a little green. Perfect. Okay. I'm just going to put a little bit of neon or some color to my sky right over the moon. He's glowing, or sun, and I'm going to dab at it if it gets too heavy. Cool. Okay, I'm going to go back down here to the foreground and deepen it again. Remember, I told you you have to move around. I want to make this darker down here because it's closer to me and further away from the light. And we're just about ready. I'm going to do some crazy, in my original here, I love to put a little movement, as you know, I did that with the birds, in my mountains just to make something fun. So I'm going to take the green mixed with some purple, which is going to make me a dark green. And I'm going to do some little swaths of movement like this. You'll see it on my traffic cabinet design. I just like thinking maybe something just marched by, something moved. Maybe it was a bird's current. And I'm going to put some of that darker, deep forest green in the background, right along some of my ugly pencil lines. I was using a watercolor pencil for you guys today, so thinking it would show up better. I don't know if it did or not. And there, we're getting to the end. I think I want to add a little bit more to my moon just because he's not looking as bright as I want him to. And I could take the sponge, just stab at it. And a little bit over here that I missed. Just kind of look around your canvas and see where you might have missed something. And I bet all of you have a gorgeous looking Sonoran desert scene. There were none of these saguaros in the place I went hiking last week. But I took lots of pictures. When you pull tape, you should always pull it away from your drawing. Pull it into the wet area, you could rip the paper. Can't wait to see yours. Voila. Oh my gosh, I bet yours is gorgeous. Very nice. Okay, so it'll be hard, I know, to pick it up, but I am going to tilt my camera back up and hopefully you can share me your work if you can. If you can't, that's okay. And I'll pick up the one that I can pick up and show you while I am more vertical. Yay! if you did it this way, if you did it where you are saving it to put all black, or maybe you just used your black watercolors here right now, that's okay, because you could come back later whenever you get some India ink and you could put that India ink over where your black watercolor is, or your black markers were at. If you did it like this one, then of course, in acrylic or in watercolor, you won't have to do any black. There's no black in this painting, believe it or not. I did not put any black in there, but it looks dark enough, like the cacti are in silhouette. Yeah. So does anybody want to show what you got at this time? The few minutes we have left. I'd love to see.